Well, thank you, Brent, and also to the producers. So our planning committee thought it would be good to end with a little time to just have a free-form discussion. Any additional comments you had about research priorities? This is a good chance to make suggestions for what we can be doing through the university, ARS, in some cases with NRCS technical assistance, but also extension and outreach activities. Before we dive into that last set of comments, though, I promised Dave Hammer a few minutes to talk about the soil health testing lab that they have developed on campus, and asked Dave to address a couple of the questions that came up about soil organic matter. So Dave.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Rob. Most of you probably know that for a long time we had a really good characterization laboratory at the University of Missouri. 35, 40 years ago, almost every land-grant university had one. We're the only one left. Texas A&M closed in August of last year, and that left us the only one standing. We have converted with financial support from NRCS from characterization to soil health. So we are one of 3 laboratories in the country that does some suite of soil health analyses, and I think we do more than anybody else. We do phospholipid fatty acid, and the only other lab I know of in the country that does that is Ward Labs up in Lincoln. So if you've got questions about that, we can handle those analyses for you. The other thing that is unique about our phospholipid fatty acid, we're doing everything that we can to keep the prices down for you folks. So when we announced at the Soil Health Expo that Tim had in August that we were doing PLFA analyses for $40, Ward Labs was there. They were charging $80 at the time. That afternoon, they lowered their price to $40. So we're now at $39, just to be snotty about it. I've got 3 sets of handouts up here for you that you can take. I don't think I've got enough for everybody, but one of them tells you how to sample in the field. One of them gives a price list, and then the other one tells you what the analyses are that we do. We've got a suite of 11 chemical and mineralogical analyses we do. Real important is the the wet aggregate stability. And there were 3 questions that came up that I'd like to address that Rob said it'd be okay, because they're all basically related to the same thing. One was, I think Jules said, somebody ought to tie down the organic matter issue, and there were 2 contexts of that. One was how much is enough, and the other is how deep do you sample? Well, the real problem with organic matter agriculturally is we measure it by a percentage of the soil. So you've heard some people say, oh, well, we had 3% of this or 1% in that. So the real question is how many pounds per acre do you have? And in order to get that, you have to have bulk density, which is one of the things we'll measure in the lab. How deep? We think we need to be uniform because we're not sure how rapidly the organic matter accrues or to what depth. We know it takes a lot more time than some people are saying. For example, we had a study on native prairies and restored prairies in this state, and it seems to take about 10 years under native warm season grasses to go from whatever the baseline was to an increase of 1.5%. So it's a slow process. Really the question is, Jules, have I got enough organic matter to aggregate the surface that the water's getting in the ground? If the water that falls is going into the ground, you're where you need to be. And then the organic matter will continue to accrue. But what we're going to suggest is that you get a soil sampling ring from Humboldt Manufacturing, get the one that's 3 inches long and 3 inches in diameter, and when you sample the soil, drive this critter into the ground with a board and a rubber mallet till it's flush with the surface, smooth off the bottom with a knife or a wide putty knife, and just dump it right into a Ziploc bag, and you can use it over and over and over again, and we will know the exact volume of soil that you sampled, and we'll get a pretty good bulk density out of it, okay? So that would be the approach. The other question that was raised was where are the baseline data? One of the grants we got from NRCS in the state is to answer that question. So we are actively looking for places in Missouri where you've been cover cropping for a while and you think you've made a difference. We'll sample those for free. We've also got permission from NRCS to spend some of this money out of state. So in November, we went to Dave Brandt's place and sampled fields that were baseline, i.e. he had just bought them and hadn't cover cropped. 5 years of cover cropping, 12, I think, and then another set that ranged from 20 to 35 years. We came back with 42 cores and more than 200 surface samples, and that's Jody Reisner's master's thesis. So we are going to start having some information that I think will be helpful to you that we can use to make some recommendations. So we're open for business. Our webpage is not very good. It should be much better in about 3 weeks. We waited until the laboratory was ready, had vetted all the methods, had the equipment, and feel confident that we can meet your needs when you bring us samples before we wanted to make the webpage. We didn't want to be advertising before we could deliver the goods. So hope we can serve you. That'll be here, but if you just go to the MU site, and up in the right-hand corner where it says search, type in Soil Health Laboratory. If that doesn't work for some reason, we're in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. You'll find us. It's under Soil Health Laboratory. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Dave. Okay, we just wanted to take the last 15 minutes just to gather your additional input on research and education priorities. Carrie will be writing those down. And by the way, I want to thank Carrie for putting together the research summaries that you probably saw out on the registration table. That was a good overview of many of the different research projects that are going on with cover crops. So thanks for doing that, Carrie. So I know there were some additional hands up. Let's go ahead. Yep, right here.
Hello. I had a question about the trade-offs between removing stover from corn systems and planting cover crops. Is there any research on, the trade-offs between cover crops as a way to improve ecosystem services, and if you can get those ecosystem services with cover crops, do you really need to leave the stover on the field with a no-till system?
That's a great question, and we don't, to my knowledge, have any work on that in Missouri. However, in Iowa, there's some work going on between Iowa State and DuPont with their new cellulosic ethanol facility. I visited that this fall, and it is complex because, for example, where they had removed what they felt was 50% of the corn stover, the wind, I was there on a very windy day, was blowing the remaining residue so much that there were large bare patches, as large as a good chunk of this room. So that was a case where they needed the cover crop, didn't have it, but they are recommending cover crops as a standard practice to be used when 50% of the stover is removed. But that question of how all of it fits together is an open question. So that's a great one we need more research on. Other research ideas, or again, education training ideas. Yes, right here.
Yeah, 2 points. One, till versus no-till. Have you looked at nutritional differences in terms of minerals, protein, and calorie counts?
Well, I'll ask Newell to address that because he's probably done the longest term no-till versus till with cover crops. Newell, where are you at? Back in the back.
Question again?
So the question was about till versus no-till, but not only minerals, but also, now, well, you said protein. Are you thinking plant protein? Does it lead to any nutritional difference in the plant itself? The cash crop that would be grown on till versus no-till?
I don't think we've even collected that type of information on what we've done. I mean, we've done a little bit on seed nutrients in the seed or in the grain, but that goes back at least 10 years and probably predates when we did cover crop. So unfortunately I really can't answer the question.
So I'm looking for Bob Kramer. Bob, are you still here? Yeah, so Bob, so when we enrich the soil microbial community, do we know anything about what that does to the plant above ground in terms of its nutrition for humans or livestock or other things?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I believe, we're just finding some of those specific details out, especially from the organic farming community, because that's what they want to, that community wants to show that, keeping high levels or high soil health does in fact impact quality of the food or the grain that's coming off. And there's just a few studies coming out that are actually showing that where that's specifically being looked at in terms of improving the soil biological activity. I think there's a lot more to go with that, and applying it to your other grain crops as well.
So maybe another area of research need is how we're affecting the plant's nutrition as we change some of these management factors. I think there was a comment or two over here I saw before we switched from the farmer panel. Okay. What about training? Are there particular training needs that you think we're having these soil health trainings around the states? Do we need to be doing other types of training or education programs related to cover crops? Yes, Carrie.
Jody asked the farmers at our workshop yesterday if they thought there was a need for some no-till conferences in Missouri, and the consensus was that there was no-till conferences 20 years ago and people got into it, but the people that didn't get into it at that time aren't really sure how to progress, so that maybe looking at no-till again is something we need to do with producers.
And I would just add to that, and maybe Jody would want to comment, that one thing I've picked up traveling around is some of the no-till producers feel that cover crops have made their no-till more viable, or there's large conventional grain producers that are getting into no-till now because they see cover crops as helping address some of the concerns they had, such as compaction or management of that soil resource. So, Jody?
Yes, actually, I agree with that, Rob, because the people who have been doing no-till, and I know Newell has confirmed this, it just quite isn't making it, especially with some of the soils, the silty clays and so forth that we have in Missouri. So the no-till and cover crops typically are like sisters, so they need to go together. And also the comment about the healthier the grains. I know when I was visiting with Dave Brandt at his farm, he specifically told me that his corn has higher protein and that he actually got more money at the co-op because of the increase in protein in his corn. The other thing I want to just ask, yes, we're looking for farmers in Missouri because that's fine. We have that research over in Ohio, but I want to work with Missouri farmers too so that we can compare and, say how can we get to this point. So Missouri farmers, I believe in you. Let's step up to the plate.
And Jody, while you've got the mic, so you're doing a lot of technical help with NRCS. Are there particular research needs that you feel the university or ARS could help with to help you answer technical questions you're getting?
Well, actually, my friends at ARS are doing a great job, and I know they have information that I can use. Sometimes it's, be honest with you, the time to sit and talk and get that information, so that needs to be a higher priority for all of us. And we're, like I said, we have that cover crop standard open to revision, and I like the comments I heard today about rates and so forth. And we're going to be looking at those closely while that revision is open, and I'm sure something will come up. So look forward to working with all of those people.
Yep, there's one up here. Oh, one in the back, and then Nadia.
Yeah, my name's Mark Abney. I'm a soil scientist in Missouri, working with soil health quite a bit. And from a soil scientist standpoint, I'm really interested now that we got the lab up and running. What's the biographics of the benchmark soils in Missouri? What do they look like in the pristine state? And when we've gathered that data, maybe we can get an idea of what's missing in the agroecosystems. And then another thing that I'd like to research to look at from a research standpoint is how is glyphosate affecting the mycorrhizal populations as it goes through the plants and down into the the biological soil. Is it affecting the biological soil in a negative way?
Bob, I believe you've looked at that a little bit. Are you prepared to comment on that at all, or? If you're not, that's okay.
Well, no, I can comment on what is known. Again, this is another area that has some minimal research, but there are some reports that does show in some instances that mycorrhizal infection and numbers of propagules in the soil are decreased somewhat by the use of Roundup, and this is mainly in these sites where we've been using Roundup continuously in some situations maybe for the last 17 years in the same field. So there are some reports of residual glyphosate being found in fields and in surface water, so it's really not a surprise. And mycorrhizae, apparently, at least some species are sensitive to some levels of glyphosate.
Bob, would it be fair to say there's still a lot we need to learn about mycorrhizae and how we promote them and with our cropping systems and management practices?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just mycorrhizae in general, we still have a lot to learn. We focus on mainly the economic crops, but these cover crops and Nadia's native plants, we don't know a whole lot about those.
Yep. Okay, so Nadia, you're next.
Yeah, I have, well, along those lines, I just also wonder about glyphosate on insect diversity. And also, what I think is really necessary is to do more research on the importance of cover crops for pollinators and other beneficial insects. And I know there is a lot of concern, and there is a lot of research being done, especially by the Xerces Society, but I don't see that happening very much, except for some work that a team is doing at Bradford. And then the other one is a question I have about if there are any grant incentives for farmers to establish cover crops. So
You like cost share assistance they can get? Okay, so first of all, on the pollinator question, that's a good one, and there are a couple things to be aware of. One is that in this new national survey I mentioned that Sarah is sponsoring and carried out by CTIC, there are a few pollinator questions which were not asked last year. And by the way, we had over 500 responses to that survey in the first 2 days, so I think we're going to get some great data out of that. Also, Sarah is coming out with a new publication on pollinators and cover crops. It's a bulletin that I believe will be available later this spring or summer. But on the cost share assistance, I want to call on Jody. You're pointing to somebody else? So, yes, there are cost share programs. Jody, could you say a word about that?
Sure. That one, when I was talking about the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, when I was first up there, that is one of the programs that farmers can sign up for. They go through a ranking process, and the highest ranked then regarding their resource concerns can be offered a contract, and then they have a payment rate based on the different scenarios. Last year in 2012, for cover crops, based on different scenarios like legumes, grasses or cereal grains, winter kill species and species mix, it was between $25 and $38 per acre to have a farmer try that, and then they need to do that for either 1 or 2 years. And then also the 2013 rates are not out yet, but they will be shortly.
And also through the CSP program, they could
Yes.
get cover crop cost share as well, right?
Yes, for the Conservation Stewardship Program, they would also apply and get ranked and so forth. If they rank high enough, they're offered a contract. And then there's certain enhancements that they can choose to do, which would include adopting cover crops. So there are 2 different programs that NRCS offers, yes.
And just to give you a feel for those, Jody, I just got some data from the National NRCS office yesterday, and if I was reading it correctly, it looks like there's around very roughly 1 million acres of cost-shared cover crops in this past year through NRCS. So it's a sizable thing that NRCS is investing in. Okay, there's one up here, and then we'll go back to Dave. Yep.
Okay, testing, are we on? Okay, yes. When we talk about looking into the future of what would be appropriate research, I come from a background in geophysics and oil exploration, and what I see is that if not this current generation, but within a few generations, we're really going to be pressing up against availability of the feedstocks required to produce pesticides, as in nothing lasts forever, which would be our oil resources. So if pesticides and herbicides, and in this case particularly herbicides, become very expensive or not available, what would we need to do to carry on this cover crop research? Are there alternative feedstocks that could be developed based on some type of existing biomass that we haven't explored in order to continue with the cover cropping if conventional herbicides are no longer available?
Okay, good. Dave?
This is a response to a couple of the comments, questions that have been made. Sanborn Field has come up a couple times. Sanborn Field is coming up on its 125th birthday. We are going to sample Sanborn Field completely, every plot, and we'll do a complete soil health characterization for every plot, including a deep core that will characterize top to bottom. With the native plant issue, I met last week with Bob and Randy with the Missouri Prairie Foundation. They're real excited about soil health, and they're interested in knowing what the conditions are under ideal native prairie system. So we have access now to every holding they have, and we'll sample every one of them and include that in our baseline data.
Judy, do you have anything you want to bring up from the Department of Ag perspective in terms of how this whole area of cover crops would fit with programs you have going on or some of the pest issues you see from the department?
Well, the Missouri Department of Agriculture primarily is like supports all the efforts that are going towards cover crops. We have discussions about, just this mention of pesticides and things and how they're working in the environment. We are primarily, from my perspective, we're a regulatory arm where we do regulate the pesticides and things that were used in these systems. We have been involved in organic regulations, and now we're into organic promotions and things from the ag business development side. And as many of you may or may not know, our new director with the Department of Agriculture, Richard Fordyce, was the former chair of the Soil and Water Commission, and a big supporter of these types of programs. And he personally utilizes many of the practices and things that we talk about with soil and water and on RCS on his own farm. So I think what's important to take home from the Missouri Department of Ag perspective is, yes, we're very supportive of events like this, and it would be something that we would want to continue on to being a partner in this type of relationship.
Great, thank you, Judy. Yes, Tim.
After working with cover crops on and off, one of the things I think that we need is some variety development. Seeing what Mike showed with ryegrass, annual ryegrass, and how some like Gulf and Marshall, that's what I would have picked every time. But those are, all of our hairy vetches, variety not stated, winter peas, variety not stated. There is some in crimson clover, but is all developed in Alabama. There's a tremendous opportunities that we should develop, or to help answer some of these questions that we have that we could plant earlier, maybe do a better job with coming up, because boy, you learn to appreciate the breeding efforts that went in the corn and soybeans and wheat.
Well, Tim, that's perfect, because that's the last comment I wrote down that I wanted to say before we close, just to echo Mike's comments, because we've heard some questions about, why didn't this cover crop work? What was the problem? And as Mike pointed out, sometimes it's variety selection. I referenced a farmer named Steve Groff earlier. Many of you know him, but the founder of Cover Crop Solutions and a real leader, had a lot of SARE funding over the years. And one thing he likes to say is you need to invest in your cover crop just like you would your corn and soybeans. So that means picking the right variety of the cover crop, managing, maybe it needs some fertility, but at least managing it intensely, precision planting as opposed to just throwing it on the ground. Do those things that are going to make it be successful, just like the cash crop, and that comes right back to having the appropriate varieties and germplasm. So that was a great point to bring up, Tim. All right, well, I'm getting the signal. Oh, we got one over here from Linus. We'll let you be the last word, Linus.
All right, I got one more or something else to think about. research years and years ago from the university say, hey, you need to have your corn planted in central Missouri before the 15th of May. My question is we're looking at cover crops and we might need a little more growth out of some of these. Maybe we should be rethinking our planting dates or even planting times, because the last couple of years, stuff that's planted a little later really isn't taking a yield hit like the earlier planted stuff. And I'm seeing less stress on the later planted, but that's just in my farm.
So we need to look at the whole management system, not just planting that cover crop, but how do we adjust our whole management? We had some great discussion today. Glad to, Debbie, did you want to say something?
Is it on? I have two things. One is we will be doing an evaluation and expect that to come by email. If anybody is still on the live streaming, please email me at kellyd, K-E-L-L-Y-D, @missouri.edu. Let me know you're on the live stream and we'll get the evaluation to you as well. And then the last comment that I want to make is, Rob, did you want to talk about the live streaming event?
We are going to have, on the morning of February 18th, there is a national conference on cover crops going on in Omaha, and it is at full capacity now, so we can't take any more people, but we are broadcasting the opening session of that conference to over 200 locations nationally, and I believe we have about 7 in Missouri, different extension NRCS offices. Debbie's holding up her fingers. I can't see you that far away, Debbie. So about 10 sites. So that'll be at 9. You can go to the live streaming starts at 9 a.m., but go to your extension or NRCS office. It's carrying that at about 8:30, 8:45. So how do you find those? That is on SARE.org. Just go to the website, SARE.org. It's right on the front page, the National Forum on Cover Crops and Soil Health. And you can go not only watch that live stream, but more importantly, there'll be a facilitated discussion led by NRCS or extension staff at that location. So it's a way to bring people together to talk about some local issues around these topics. So I hope you'll have a chance to participate in that. Well, I want to thank our speakers one more time. And thank you for coming.